All right, so now we begin the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is one of those books that's just good to read. It's one of those books to read and to know. There's 31 different Proverbs. There's no more than 31 days in a month. So a lot of people like to read one proverb a day and continue to read them because it's one of those deals. It's the wisdom book. There's a lot of wisdom in Proverbs. It reminds us that God is our ultimate source of wisdom. And if you can, paint a picture of whenever you need counseling, you need advice, you need wisdom, and you're sitting on your couch or laying there and going ahead and turn the TV off in your mind, and you're just asking God for wisdom, asking God for advice. And this is his wisdom to us. It's called Proverbs. And there's 31 different chapters of Proverbs. I wrote it down, 917 different Proverbs. Proverbs starts out with chapters 1 through 9 kind of introducing us to the Proverbs, and chapters 10 is kind of where it kicks off to chapter 31. And Proverbs is when I taught the Bible class, and I have for years here at the school. For the first, I think, 8 years, that was one book I made sure every teenager in our Bible class covered. Was the Proverbs. Proverbs is the wisdom book of family, emotions, relationships, life, and it's God's wisdom book to us, written by King Solomon, who was the wisest man to ever live, and he was getting this information from God. God's inspired him to speak, to write down these different Proverbs, and which points to Jesus, because Jesus even said, hey, I am greater than Solomon. I'm wiser than Solomon. And so if you read the New Testament, he references many Proverbs, and he also speaks different Proverbs. Just like at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, the man who builds his house in the sand and the man who has the house on the foundation. And throughout Scripture, you see Jesus giving these little bits of wisdom, Proverbs, to the people. Proverbs, the actual meaning, the English is instead of many words, so shortened. Kind of like a shortened little devotion is called a proverb, just instead of many words. The Hebrew is comparison. Like I said, there's 31 different proverbs. A lot of people like to say that their proverb is like I was born on January 30th, so my proverb would be January 30th. The 30th proverb would be my proverb. Many people look at the different proverbs as far as dating relationships. That's why I liked it for teenagers, to walk through there and take it from the smartest man to ever live. And I've even told teenagers, read it in the aspect that the dad wrote these proverbs for his sons. Say, how do you treat your mom? How do you treat these ladies? What are you looking for in a wife? And then go to Proverbs 31, and it lays out this Proverbs 31 woman. And then a Proverbs 31 man, this is what he's looking for. And a Proverbs 31 woman is who she's desiring to be. But then you can reverse that into what the man needs to desire, not only to want in a spouse, but also desire to be for himself. And so you can read these different Proverbs from Solomon, and it's the book about wisdom. A lot of times, some people in life get a life coach or a mentor or a counselor or somebody to help them lead through life. That's Proverbs. I like to, when somebody first becomes a believer, they get serious about their relationship with the Lord, and they say, hey, I want to start reading the Bible. I always say, read the book of James. James, to me, would be the New Testament Proverbs, because it tells you how to live your life. Proverbs tells you how to live your life in a good way, because it's going to say, hey, look, there's two paths, and you get to choose. But God says, here's some wisdom and how you should lead your life, how you should live your life. And to me, when you read the book of James, it's the same way. James says, hey, yes, you're right. You can do what you want to do, but control your tongue. It's like a spark that starts a fire, right? It's like the rudder that turns the whole ship. And it's this book of wisdom in James, and you see the same kind of wisdom in Proverbs. So when you read these different Proverbs, and I encourage you, if you haven't read through the Proverbs, you really should take a month and read it, because you're going to find the wisdom like in chapter 27. verse 19 or verse 17. This was my word for 2019, or my proverb for this year. And it was, iron sharpens iron, so one man shall sharpen another. And that's been kind of like my goal that I've been trying to remind myself on a daily basis. Hey, I need to be sharpened by others, and I should be sharpening others. And that came from the Proverbs. If you flip to chapter 28, verse 14, to me, where wisdom begins is fear of the Lord. And once you learn to fear the Lord, and not fear in a cowardly way, but fear out of respect way, excuse me, that's where the wisdom begins. And chapter 28, verse 14 says, blessed is the one who fears the Lord, but whoever hardens his heart will fall into calamity. And you think about people in the scripture whose hearts were hardened, like Pharaoh, right? And where did his life lead? Then you think of people who feared the Lord, like King David, like Solomon, like Moses, like Abraham. And so it tells me, and this will tell you as you walk through it, hey, fear of the Lord is a good thing. Fear of the Lord is where wisdom starts. So you can thumb through these. I hope you have a favorite proverb. If not, I encourage you to read through them until you find one. If you have children, man, Proverbs is a great nightly devotion. Teach your kids the wisdom of God. Proverbs 16, verse 9. The heart of a man plans his ways, but the Lord establishes his steps. Right? And it's full of them. Look at Proverbs 15. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. What about that in our marriages? And in our parenting? And the way we treat others? There's a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way to death. It's not our way, it's God's way. So Proverbs to me is a way to look at wisdom in parenting, in relationships, in emotions, in your personal life. When you're seeking answers, hey, what should I do? And you can read, most time Proverbs gives you two different directions. A wise man does this, foolish man does that. Someone who fears the Lord does this, someone who doesn't fear the Lord does that. So maybe your homework for next time your house church meets is picking your favorite Proverbs and maybe just share. You don't have to read it, you don't have to explain why. Maybe, hey, my favorite was chapter 12. So a few questions that I have at the end of Proverbs is this one. Do you have faith in God's wisdom? A lot of times we feel like we take on our own wisdom and we know what's right or what we need to do or how we need to lead. But do we have the faith that God's wisdom is what's right for our lives? Because a lot of times you read these and you say, well, that really doesn't apply to me. Well, yes, it does. Because this is God's wisdom to his children, so that's for us. So, do you have faith in God's wisdom? Second thing, of course, like I said earlier, what is your favorite proverb? And then the third thing and final thing is, have you ever had a chance to teach Proverbs to somebody else, maybe not in a educational setting, but in a life setting? And when somebody asks you questions, because how many times do people come to you and say, hey, what would you do here? Hey, what would you do there? How should I handle a situation? Wouldn't it be great to know the Proverbs well enough to say, hey, have you considered Proverbs 16? Have you considered Proverbs chapter 18? Have you looked at Proverbs 31? Right? When young people used to come to me when I was youth minister, how do you know who you marry? Have you looked at Proverbs 31 so you know what you're looking for in a bride? So you know what you're looking for in a groom? So how cool would it be if we knew enough Proverbs that we could teach or give advice based off Proverbs? Have you ever done that? And which one did you use? So have a great evening. Dig through these Proverbs. You got 31 days to make sure you get them all read.